So, uh, Madam Ambassador, I understand that you have been posted to New Delhi and Beijing, and I guess that your former post also make you travel. I mean, you travel a lot to other places in ASEAN. Anything in Hanoi in the last few months surprised you? Or
Well, first of all, it's a real honour for me and a privilege to serve in Vietnam. I have to say that Vietnam was my number one choice for this posting, and I'm very pleased to be here. Yes, I think I have a broad understanding of the Asia region and ASEAN. I've worked a lot in ASEAN, but there's so much to learn about Vietnam when you go deeper. For example, this is my first visit to Ho Chi Minh City, and I'm very aware that within the different regions of Vietnam that there are really large cultural, language, food differences, and that's an adventure I want to explore during my time here.
you said that you've been to Vietnam 14 years ago. Was that like a business trip or like was it a tourist one?
Well, my first trip was actually 17 years ago when I accompanied our Foreign Minister here. But 14 years ago I came as a tourist, and then I've also come back several times for different work-related reasons. And each time I've loved Vietnam. And what is great to see is how the changes in Vietnam have occurred over that time. As you know, the Ho Chi Minh of today looks nothing like the city I saw 14 years ago.
In what way? Like, did you see the change? Because I mean, like for me, I study in Hanoi, for example, and then like the change in the last 10 or 12 years. I mean, since I left Hanoi, I was always surprised, and the traffic there was so terrible.
Yes, well, I think with economic development comes huge opportunities and growth, but it also comes with challenges. So what I've seen is the growth of high-rises, of large businesses, but also I do see more traffic and more pollution. So with those opportunities come challenges, and I know the Vietnamese government is grappling with some of those challenges now.
Do you face any kind of like similar problems in, I mean, say Auckland, for example?
Well, in New Zealand, we very much pride ourselves on our clean, green image. Not only is that something that we sell for tourism and with our agriculture products, but it's something that we value as New Zealanders. So, but it is a challenge. Even with a smaller population in New Zealand, we still have to balance economic growth with that clean, green image. So I think around the world it is something we're all grappling with, but because it's such a strong value for New Zealand, I think we have particularly tried to face up to those challenges.
Gotcha. I wonder, like, so it's been 2 months for you in this position. I wonder, like, what are your priorities for, I mean, your term here in Vietnam? What do you expect to achieve?
Well, I'm very pleased that the New Zealand-Vietnamese relationship is on a very solid foundation and a very strong friendship. But as a new ambassador, of course, I have high ambition and I have new ideas. So what I really want to see over my term is continued growth in the trade relationship. I think there's huge potential in the education market. We are very pleased to welcome a number of students to New Zealand, but I think there's really untapped potential there. In addition, I think the political and defence links are also strong, but again, how can we push the boundaries and make that friendship even stronger?
You mentioned education, and I remember I interviewed Minister Stephen Joyce 3 years ago. And we also talk a lot on like education corporations, but I can see the number still like around 2,000 students each year to New Zealand. Is it like because we kind of hover around that threshold, and there's no moving up? Is it hard like to push for more development? Or?
Well, we're very pleased this year actually that we've seen a 21% growth in the number of visa applications. as you mentioned, we have been hovering at 2,000 for a few years, but we're very hopeful that now with this increased growth that we can be spreading the word more about the high quality education offering that New Zealand provides. All our universities are in the top 3% of world rankings. We offer a safe environment for study, and we have a strong emphasis on innovation and work-ready graduates. So we think with that package, we really want to grow the Vietnamese market.
I wonder, like, you know, if I have to persuade a student here, like, about either it's going to New Zealand or is it going to Australia, for example. I mean, because it's within the same distance from Vietnam. What might they choose New Zealand over Australia, for example? What's your competitive edge?
I think in New Zealand what you find is, as I mentioned, all our universities are in the top 3%. So in terms of choosing which university, you know all of the universities are going to offer you a high quality outcome. I think New Zealanders are known generally as innovative, that we have a small population, so we learn to do things in new ways, and that's the way that we focus on our education. And actually OECD has ranked New Zealand very highly in terms of our innovative approach to education and our teaching of innovation. So I think those are the key offerings. We also have a very safe environment in New Zealand, and our institutions and our government have placed a strong emphasis on pastoral care of international students, which I think is absolutely correct. We need to make sure that students coming to New Zealand have an enjoyable time and feel safe and supported.
Have you talked to like Vietnamese students, in New Zealand, or like have you talked like to university in New Zealand about like receiving Vietnamese students? I wonder like what's the impressions of the Vietnamese students there? Any complaints on them?
Well, we have a very prestigious New Zealand government scholarship, and we do a very rigorous analysis of how all the students perform that we offer scholarships to around the world. And I have to say Vietnamese students do very well in terms of performance. So certainly from the New Zealand government perspective, we're very pleased with our scholarship awardees from Vietnam. They perform very strongly as compared to other countries where we offer scholarships. In terms of the institutions, there are a number of New Zealand institutions that are very interested in the Vietnamese market, and that similarly is because they find the Vietnamese students coming to New Zealand are hardworking, apply themselves and succeed.
So you haven't heard any complaints about them being naughty or like causing trouble to them?
No, and I hope not to. But I have to say, what I really value is the New Zealand alumni back here in Vietnam. We call them the New Zealand Mafia because they are our champions here in Vietnam for the New Zealand lifestyle, the New Zealand brand, New Zealand education, and New Zealand innovation.
Right. I read the news several days ago, and AP mentioned that New Zealand tried to recruit like 100 tech workers from abroad, and they even fly them over to New Zealand, and that was quite interesting to hear that, because like for me, if I think of New Zealand, I would think of kiwi, I think of Lord of the Rings, and I may think about dairy products, but I don't know much about that New Zealand as a tech hub.
Well, thank you for raising that, because it is something that we do find in terms of our image, that we are known as clean and green, which is great, we are, but actually we do offer a whole lot more, and there are a number of companies in New Zealand that, particularly in the software space or in the app space, are doing some really innovative, exciting things. And they're also interested in Vietnam and partnering here in Vietnam. So last year, Minister Stephen Joyce opened the Kiwi Hub, Connections Hub here in Ho Chi Minh City, and that was the idea, to be a launching pad for New Zealand tech companies looking to partner with Vietnamese or looking to sell into the Vietnamese market, so that they would have an easier way to integrate into the Vietnamese market.
Do you have like many connection hubs like that in ASEAN also, or like Ho Chi Minh is one of the first? I wonder.
This is a first, and it's private sector driven. Of course, it's supported by the New Zealand government, but it's private sector driven, which shows, I think, the drivers between the tech industries in New Zealand and Vietnam, that there are cooperation and innovative ideas that we can use to work together in this industry.
I understand that yesterday you also have talked with your your New Zealand business here, and what was their reactions and the Connection Hub, for example, how is it doing so far? It's been 7 months, right? Yeah.
Well, first of all, if I can advertise the New Zealand Wine and Food Festival, which I went to on Saturday, that was an incredibly high-class event which showcased the best of New Zealand wine and food. It was great to see the marriage of great New Zealand high-quality, safe products with Vietnamese flavours, and I think that goes to show the real promise in the Vietnamese market for some of the high-quality and safe New Zealand food products and wine. So that was a really fun event. Great to meet some of the New Zealand's best winemakers here and talk to them about how they're trying to get into the markets and on the shelves here. In terms of the Tech Hub, I know that they have managed to attract about 3 or 4 New Zealand companies to use that technological hub on a regular basis, but they are also using it as an open door, so if New Zealand companies come here for a week, that they have a place to base themselves from. We also, in August, are welcoming a number of the MBA students from one of our Auckland University MBA programs, and they will come, base themselves at the Tech Hub, look at the business plans for the companies that they come from in terms of how they might build bridges into the Vietnamese market. So I think the Technological Hub is going to be a great launching pad for a number of New Zealand businesses looking to partner here in Ho Chi Minh City.
So what's the feedback that you heard from your business people here, about the environment here? In terms of business environment, and also in terms of the policy by the government here.
Well, a number of our companies our larger companies have been here for some time. So I met with Fonterra, who have been in the Vietnamese market for a number of years. And of course, something that they regularly talk about is the need for regulatory transparency as something still where there's room for improvement. That the policies of the Vietnamese government are sound, but it's trying to understand when, how, who the regulations affect, and an understanding of how to feed back into the Vietnamese system if they have concerns or comments or questions.
Compared with other ASEAN countries, for example, it has issues in Vietnam. How's that compared with other countries in the region, for example?
I think I've worked, as I mentioned, ASEAN-wide for a number of years, including in relation to the ASEAN, New Zealand, Australia FTA. And I would say across the region there's a real desire, both from the governments and the business sector, for improving that ease of doing business side. And I think a number of the countries in ASEAN, this is something both where there's room to improvement, but you do increasingly hear from the governments a desire to look again at how they're formulating regulations. I think for New Zealand, TPP was a good vehicle for exploring some of these issues, and there was a regulatory coherence chapter in the TPP which dealt with some of these, how to make sure you are creating an environment where businesses are able to flourish. TPP is obviously facing some headwinds, but for New Zealand, we're interested in seeing how the TPP minus the US might still go ahead. And I think the reason for that is that we still see strategic and economic gains from the TPP, including through things like regulatory coherence.
I understand that, you've been involved with with pushing the free trade policy in the region. Are you disappointed with the dropping of the TPP by Trump's administration. And you mentioned about like pushing the TPP forward minus the US. And how do you say that will happen? Because I understand that most countries have made lots of political sacrifice, including New Zealand, when it comes to dairy product, for example. And I think most will see the big pictures with the US there. But without the US, like we accept the sacrifice that we made at the negotiating table. Or do we want like to negotiate again, and it may take for several years, several years to do that?
Well, first of all, New Zealand was disappointed with the withdrawal of the United States. But as I mentioned before, we still think there's value in the TPP. The TPP includes a vision for regional economic integration, and something that I have found that there's a lot of commonality between New Zealand and Vietnam is that we have a vision that includes an openness to trade, that includes a desire to economically integrate with the wider region. And I think this is really important when we are hearing increasingly protectionist echoes around the world, that those who do have that vision for wider economic integration are standing behind that vision. I think that it will be important for Vietnam as APEC host to, again, spell out what is APEC about. APEC is about liberalising trade, bringing our markets closer together. And I think the TPP is the same. Of course, there were balances in the final negotiation, but ultimately it is a trade and economic vehicle that's about bringing the economies of the Asia-Pacific together, and that is a vision that New Zealand has consistently stuck behind for a number of years in terms of our trade policy.
I mean, the British Parliament have just approved the Brexit proposal, and we've seen the sign of like anti-globalizations all over the world. I mean, it's not with Trump, it's with Brexit, and we may see that with the Dutch or like the French election this year. And yeah, do you think like the trade, the free trade agenda when we start, or like there'll be like how should I put it, an overturn of the the wave that has been for quite some time since the 90s up to now. And yeah.
I think there's a certain amount of, you can't turn back the clock on global value chains. For example, there are a number of high-tech companies that have based their production out of Vietnam. You can't turn back the clock and say, of course, those are only going to be produced in certain countries. New Zealand contributes to global value chains, particularly in terms of our agricultural products. We're not going to turn back the clock on that and only sell to ourselves. There's a certain amount of economic reality that is our economies are deeply integrated with each other. That's a reality that's quite different from 20 years ago. I do think that it is important that countries like New Zealand and Vietnam do continue to spell out that, yes, we have a vision that includes openness to trade, that includes continuing on the path of regional economic integration, and that we articulate that clearly for our domestic audiences as well as our international audiences.
How's the audience in your countries, for example, like react to the recent change? Because we've seen so much like nationalism and protectionism in Europe and in North America. How the voters in your countries see?
Well, certainly within New Zealand there's a diversity of voices around the trade agenda, just in the same way there's a diversity of voices around the political agenda. And that's healthy. But I would say that New Zealand is an exporting country, and I think there is an understanding within New Zealand that our future prosperity lies in continuing that exporting, continuing to grow our exports and continuing to reach out into the world. So I think there is that base level understanding that New Zealand cannot just sell to itself. We have to look outwards and New Zealanders travel the world and are quite outward looking. So I think there is that understanding that we cannot close ourselves off from the world, and we don't want to.
How will, like you just mentioned APEC, I wonder like how will APEC can help this cause? And I mean, like frankly, we feel pretty. I mean, we used to be very optimistic, and we also very open to globalization. But then suddenly we see the change with Brexit and Trump and like everything. So we just don't know, like, because we as a small nations, we easily we will be affected by the big powers, and that may change the dynamic in in global corporations. So how will APEC can help, or like how will the recent rise of anti-globalization will affect the APEC corporations? Do you think?
Well, as I said before, I think Vietnam has a real opportunity as host this year to spell out its vision for APEC. APEC, since its inception, has clearly spelled out its goals for trade liberalisation, the Bogle goals, and in the nuts and bolts way, how it is allowing economies to work closely together. So in customs, in countering terrorism, in the range of areas that APEC deals with, it's about trying to make the goods and services between our countries flow better. And I think Vietnam has a real leadership role to spell out why we do that and how that protectionist kind of mentality is not welcome in APEC, that we have a vision for the world that is more open markets and goods and services flowing freely.
So what do you think of the priorities that the Vietnamese have spelled out for now, for the APEC up to now?
Well, there are four priorities
Yes.
that Vietnam has, but the two that I'll highlight in particular from a New Zealand perspective, one is the regional economic integration agenda, and this for New Zealand is one of the highest priorities for us, how we can continue to ensure that APEC is driving the free flowing of goods and services between our countries. So this is a very important part, we think, of APEC. And included in this is the vision of FTAP, the Free Trade Area of the Asia Pacific. We appreciate that this won't happen tomorrow, but it is a useful vision to have, that we strive to closer and closer, get our markets closer and closer together. The other priority I wanted to highlight was sustainable agriculture. New Zealand and Vietnam are both strong agricultural economies, so how we look at dealing with climate change, how we look at sustainability, how we look at building up farmers as productive and effective and efficient business people, which is what they are, and how we can ensure that there's a free flowing of agricultural goods in the APEC region. These are all very important challenges.
So you was not at the recent song, right? You was not at the recent song? Yeah. So I just wondered, like, the effectiveness of APEC, can it really help boost the trade? Because we can see that the old institution like WTO or like it has been failed somewhat, and that's why we need the TPP. But the TPP was, it was concluded, but then it could not be ratified up to now. So I wonder, like, whether the APEC is still an effective vehicle to boost the free trade or like the cooperation in the region or not. Yeah.
Well, first of all, APEC is very large and does cover a wide range of topics. But there are very tangible and practical outcomes that come from APEC. One in particular I wanted to highlight is the APEC Business Travel Card, which allows a most among most of the APEC economies for easy travel for business people. This is something New Zealand business people love because it allows them to more freely travel around the ASEAN region, for example, and to Vietnam. This is a very tangible example of how APEC has made trading in the region easier. But there are a number of other initiatives that are similarly quite practical that APEC has been working on for a number of years. If you look at the customs timeframes, if you look at the costs of moving goods between our country, these have all fallen dramatically, as well as tariffs. These are things that APEC has been slowly chipping away at for a number of years and perhaps don't make the headlines, but I think that kind of cooperation between the key trading partners actually does deliver tangible outcomes for businesses.
So in a way, you still believe that APEC can help the region in corporations?
I certainly do. For New Zealand, APEC are our key trading partners. It just makes sense that you talk to your key trading partners about how to make our customs processes better, how to make our e-commerce processes more aligned. Last year there was a securities, an Asia Securities Fund where it allowed for those participating economies for the easier transfer of security funds between us. These are actually really practical initiatives that I think are important for us. As our key trading partners are all in APEC, it just makes sense that we continue to stand behind APEC as a vehicle.
Vietnam and New Zealand, we are both agriculture exporters. I wonder, do we have? I mean, it's look like we seems to compete more rather than cooperate. Is it the sense that? Do you think that's the case, or do you think that we still have a chance to cooperate?
I actually think we're perfect partners
Yes.
because the kind of agricultural products that New Zealand produces and produces very well, like dairy, meats, kiwi fruit, wine, certain vegetables, are not things that are produced in Vietnam or not produced in large numbers. In Vietnam, you're very famous for your tropical fruit, your rice, your cashew nuts, your coffee, none of which New Zealand produces. So actually I see us very much as a complementary economies rather than competing economies. Where I think we can work more is using New Zealand agri-tech and using our expertise to actually help assist Vietnamese producers to get their most out of their agricultural products. New Zealand has invested a lot in our research and development of agriculture, and we've invested a lot into our food safety systems. These are areas where I think we have expertise and experience to share with Vietnam.
But the trade volume right now between the two countries is still pretty. I say it's still pretty small. Compared with the potential.
I agree.
Yes.
So our two Prime Ministers set out a goal of doubling trade by 2020. And at the moment we are continuing to see trade growth, but not at the volumes that I would like to see. So I think certainly during my time I'll be trying to encourage those trade and economic linkages. I think in New Zealand increasingly business people are looking for new market opportunities, and I think Vietnam offers some great choices there. We have a trade mission coming in August, which again will help profile the opportunities here in Vietnam back to New Zealand businesses.
In April, you have it is the first Navy ships from New Zealand visiting Vietnam?
It's not the first, no, but we're very pleased it is coming to Da Nang. I think it's a great physical symbol of the defence cooperation, and there is increasing defence linkages between Vietnam and New Zealand, and certainly something that I'm again keen to grow during my time here. Also in April we have our Chief of Army visiting as well. So you can see that at that high level there's a lot of interest in hearing the challenges and opportunities for the defence relationship.
One of the heated issue in the last few years has been the South China Sea issues. What is the New Zealand stand on these issues, and how do New Zealand see the land reclamation and the island buildings in the South China Sea up to now by China?
Well, our Foreign Minister, Minister McCulley, has made some speeches in the region and also put out Press State New Zealand's view of this issue. Certainly what he has consistently called for is for all parties to show restraint and respect for international law, including UNCLOS. These are values that New Zealand holds dear and something that we articulate in relation to this issue.
So the visit by the New Zealand ships, for example, how should we interpret here when it's come to like regional security or regional stability? And,
well, I think that the ship visit should be viewed as a real desire to increase our bilateral defence links. As I mentioned, there have been a number of linkages that have really grown over the last couple of years, including high-level discussions. We think there's more we could do in defence cooperation. There has been some training, for example, of English language training of Vietnamese peacekeepers, as we know that peacekeeping is an area that Vietnam is increasingly stepping up into. So we want to help Vietnam on its journey to building its peacekeeping capacity.
And I wonder, like, it doesn't. So, what can New Zealand also do to help, like, maintain the? No, actually, we should. So, New Zealand also shares the maritime border with Australia, another like big power. I wonder, like, how do you manage that relations? Because I think like there's some similarity between the story between New Zealand and Australia, and maybe like Vietnam and China that we can learn from.
I think I would disagree. New Zealand is an island nation with no other country in close distance. And New Zealand has one of the largest exclusive economic zones and continental shelves in the world because we are a long, skinny couple of islands. So, of course, in that context, UNCLOS and international law are important to us, but we haven't had disputed borders. We have the luxury of being an island nation, far away even from our neighbour, Australia. So it's not a challenge that we've had to face.
So even like in regional, you also have the regional cooperation organization like ASEAN in the South Pacific, and you don't have any problem with managing large powers like Australia.
In the South Pacific?
Yes, in the South.
Well, I mean, New Zealand would always readily say that our closest partner is Australia.
Right.
We are economically integrated with them. There's free movement of people between our two countries. Of course, there's rivalry on the rugby field, but they are our closest partner, our biggest economic partner, and our strongest political partner. So in the South Pacific in particular, we work very closely with Australia in terms of our development program, in terms of our political relationships with the South Pacific.
So from I wonder like anything that we can learn from the cooperation there, so that we can do. I mean, we can apply it in the South China Sea. Don't you think? Is there anything that we can?
I think the relationship between New Zealand and Australia is probably very different from some of the relationships in this region. As I mentioned, we're very economically integrated, for example, is one element, and there's free movement of people. So, and we have a close history of cooperation, and we have a similarly historic background, both as former colonial countries. So, we are very proud of our relationship with Australia, but I don't think we would seek to pretend that that is the same of some of the complexities of the relationships in this region. I mean, the one thing I would say is I'm a diplomat, and from my perspective, dialogue and cooperation are always the foundations of any good relationship. So that is the kind of toolkit that I think any diplomat takes with them, and certainly in challenging environment, those are the toolkits that I think should come to the fore.
So, I wonder, like, anything that you, I think I covered like mostly all the areas that in the bilateral relations. I wonder if you have anything that you want to address more on the bilateral relations.
I just wanted to bring your attention to the Hillary Edmund Fellowship. This is a new scheme that New Zealand has. It's very prestigious. We have 100 places worldwide where we're looking for visionary entrepreneurs who have a good idea, who can articulate that idea, and what the Hillary Fellowship will provide is assist with a flexible visa arrangement to come and live in New Zealand, and wraparound services to provide mentoring, to provide partnerships, to help with research and development of that idea. I think this is a very exciting scheme because it shows that New Zealand is looking at creative ways how we can attract world-class startups and world-class dreamers to New Zealand to develop our economy, but also to help those entrepreneurs build their future and build their dreams.
Have you got any like entrepreneur from the ASEAN like coming to New Zealand yet, or like mostly? Is it the first time?
This is the first time, so so we'll have to see. I would certainly love it if there were applicants from Vietnam. As I mentioned, it's worldwide, so it will be competitive. But in my time here, I've seen a number of creative Vietnamese, so I hope that there will be some Vietnamese who take a look at this this opportunity. If anyone's interested, please take a look at the Embassy Facebook page, where I would love that there's a strong Vietnamese presence in this program.
So beside beside a good contrast, beside education, any other like priorities that you have in Vietnam also?
Well, as I mentioned, I do want to increase the political and defence linkages. I think it's important that alongside the trade and economic, that we also have a balance of wider political relationship. We want to be a strategic partner of Vietnam, and I think to be a strategic partner we have to show the value of the relationship across the trade and economic and the political space. And I think there's a lot that Vietnam and New Zealand can talk about across the board. We are both partners in a number of the regional fora, which you already talked about. I think we share a number of similar ways of viewing the world. So I think there's more that we can do to bring the wider relationship closer together as well.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We actually do have some, we call it like fun questions. So maybe like hỏi rồi là bạn nhìn vào camera hay là như nào thì
có người đọc cho bạn.
Có người đọc thì tốt hơn nào?
Dạ đúng.
Okay, so the cameraman said that I should read the questions to you.
Okay.
Yes, so
Okay.
so let me do it. Okay, I do have that on. Okay, let me do it from my